Gym owners, are you finding your team isn't following through and doing what they said they would?
All right now, Lundberg, I'm kind of busy.
Well, in this video, I'm going to break down the most common reasons why and show you exactly how to solve for them. My name is Mark Fisher from BizForUnicorns.com, and I'm not gonna lie, this is one of my favorite topics because at the end of the day, if you can't get work done through other people, then you're always gonna be constrained by your own energy and ability to physically do work. In the business of fitness, it seems there's a lot of owners that feel like they just can't get their team to do what they said they would do. So understand there's only 6 reasons why your team is not doing what they said they would. Reason number 1, they don't actually know what you expected. Now, this one is pretty easy to solve, and my suggestion is you want to have a written, shared meeting agenda where you're writing down exactly who is going to do what and by when so that there is no potential confusion around what the next action steps are. And if you want to find out more about my meeting agenda, if you just go down in the description box below, click on the link for my video for how I run effective one-on-one meetings. And while you're there, you could, if you wanted, hit subscribe. It's up to you. It's up to you. But if you do it, follow through because I'll hold you accountable. Reason number 2, they don't know how or they lack the skill. In some situations, they maybe know, but they're maybe afraid to say how out to lunch they feel. And sometimes this can look like they did it, but it was crappy. And they sometimes just have a different stare on you. They don't know that it's crappy. So in this situation, the solve is to train them. You have to spend time helping them develop that skill. Now, this might not be skill that you have. It doesn't necessarily need to be you. For instance, members of the Unicorn Society will often do coaching calls with myself or Michael Keeler, Pete Dupuis, or Ben, and we will train your staff for you. It's one of the most awesome things. And to find out more about the Unicorn Society, you can find the link in the description box below, right by the subscribe button. Reason number 3, they don't have the motivation. They don't really want to do it. And this has 2 potential solves. The happiest one is you need to find a way to really incentivize them. And this might be explaining how this links into the mission, and more often than not, that's going to be a piece of it. They just don't really understand how what you've asked them to do is going to move the ball forward. So they're feeling a little resistant and they're pushing it off, and that may or may not be something that they've said explicitly. Related, you could also discuss, is there some kind of financial incentive you can use to inspire them to take action? Now listen, you have to be really careful. Money is hot, and there really are some downsides to incentivizing with money. I'm not saying you should rely on this a lot of the time, but it certainly is one way to create another incentive. Now, unfortunately, the unhappy solve to the situation is if you just can't get the individual motivated, they just don't want to do the thing that they have to do, well, then you might need to replace them. Might just not be the right person for this particular job. The next 3 issues all really have to do with time management. The 4th reason is they just have too much on their plate in general. Either they've taken on too much, or maybe you've given them too much to do.
I'm also gonna need you to go ahead and come in on Sunday.
The solve here might be doing some kind of time audit to understand how they're actually using their time on a daily and weekly basis, because in fact, you might be over ambitious about what you're asking them to do, and they might, through desire to please you, say yes to more than it's practical for them to actually get done based on the constraints of a 40-hour week and how long it realistically takes for things to happen. So once you've done a time audit, you can just decide what to prioritize and get some things off their plate. Reason number 5 is a corollary of number 4. They have too much on their plate this week. This is another relatively easy solve. Once you know for sure that that's the case, just move the goalpost if need be. You'll have to help them prioritize. You can't make more time. That's always the ultimate constraint. And if you think about things on a long enough time scale, it will also reduce any anxiety or stress about deadlines. You can also help them understand what is most important to get done this week. And ideally, it's obviously better to communicate about this in advance rather than getting to a sad meeting where they didn't do 2/3 of the things they said they would. Now you're disappointed, they're sort of frustrated. It's not the end of the world, but again, it's better to do this in advance and to learn how to make your expectation for the team member that they communicate this in advance, not that they get to the meeting with an unfinished to-do list. And finally, if 4 and 5 are really about the effectiveness, about focusing on the most important priorities over other things, 6 is about efficiency. They have enough time, but they're just not using their time well. They're getting easily distracted, and the actual output they're giving you for the amount of time they're working just isn't up to snuff.
I probably only do about 15 minutes of real, actual work.
Potential solve is, once you have understand how they're using time, is give them particular strategies such as time blocking. So that particularly if it's somebody that has, let's say, a couple hours a day where they're either not training or they have independent project time, help them use that time well. And then finally, I would note in brief here, one of the other things that brings people off track, even if they've created the perfect plan, is they just get interrupted, right? And in brief, there's 3 reasons you get interrupted. There's a physical interruption, where somebody barges in the room or a coworker distracts them, and that's a matter of just setting expectations and them having a boundary setting conversation. And as the owner, you can help with that. 2, sometimes they have digital interruptions. Also pretty easy solve. Don't let your team send each other G-chats to knock each other out of flow. Don't let them be checking emails when they're working on a project. And then finally, the hardest part is mental interruptions, internal interruptions. And this is just when they're working on a project and they just get bored and itchy. This is, I think, the most fundamental issue, and there's not a universally helpful solve for this other than helping provide structures that your team can use to get better at focusing for longer periods of time. You might want to experiment with a technique called a Pomodoro, which is named after a clock, a timer clock by an Italian, and Pomodoro is tomato. It's pretty weird. But the idea is not weird, and it's good. Basically, set a clock for 25 minutes, put your head down, you're committed to do this thing, you will not fail for 25 minutes, and then you take a 5-minute break, because you're not a robot. You need breaks. All right, pals, I hope you found this useful. Again, if you haven't checked out my system for running effective one-on-ones, do check out that video in the box below, because remember, you have to inspect what you expect. And if you find they're not doing what they said they would do, well, amazing. Now you can just sort of go through this checklist and help support them in solving the issue, taking action, and getting all the things done. Thanks as always for checking out my videos. I'll see you next time, where I will share more actionable tips, psychological frameworks, and philosophy.